to the webinar organized by this academic network of global education and learning. And today we are going to hear about Teachers for a Sustainable Future, which examines the role of higher education institutions in integrating global education with a particular emphasis on teacher education. And we have several presenters today, and we have several studies that explore various dimensions of how global education is incorporated into teacher training. And we have colleagues from Czechia, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia who are here today to share their findings on the opportunities and challenges of integrating global education into teacher education programs in the Visegrad countries. So you are most welcome.
I will briefly introduce our project objectives and participants and some basic conceptualization, and then I give the floor to Christina soon. So first of all, this is a great pleasure for us to have this opportunity to present the findings of our project, and we are really excited and looking forward to a fruitful discussion. So first I will talk about the conceptualization of global education and education for sustainability development, how we interpret this in the project. Christina will talk about the context. So what are these Visegrad countries context mean? So Visegrad countries is the Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Poland. The motivations, Christina again will talk about what motivates teacher educators to put global education on their agendas. And then I am going back, I will talk about the current practices with special focus on good examples. Magdalena will tackle obstacles and opportunities that how we identified in our project based on the based on our respondents' thoughts. Then Magdalena is going to give concluding remarks, and then we open up the floor. So Christina, can you please go to the next slide? So this project is founded by the International Visegrad Fund. It's an ongoing project. It's going to an end this year. It will culminate in a national report and a comparative report that we are working on at the moment. The partners are civil organizations or societies, CSOs, organizations. The coordinator is HAND Association in Hungary, which is an umbrella association including 13 Hungarian CSOs engaged in international development, humanitarian aid, and global citizenship. Partners are Żywica, Komenijského Institute, sorry for the pronunciation, and from Slovakia, Grupa Zagranica from Poland, and Sever from the Czech Republic. And this project built on a previous one, and you can see the results on the website that is shown on the slide. So our objectives with this project were to strengthen the advocacy and integration of sustainability and global education in the field of teacher education in the Visegrad countries. And we do several activities, for example, facilitating networking, sharing of expertise, reaching out to policymakers. But what we are focusing now is this comparative research and sharing the results of it. Okay, so please, next slide. Christina, can you? The participants I just briefly would like to introduce. Agapkész Károsi was the coordinator on behalf of HAND. She is not here with us. Mónus Ferenc and Zsuzsanna Huszár were senior researchers from different universities in Hungary. Tamás Béres is a PhD student, and I am from Eötvös, Loránd. So we represent a diverse university background. Jakub Ostrál, he is not here with us, from Sever, and Magdalena and a PhD student Dobrava from the University of Warsaw from Poland, and Christina, who is here with us, and Katarina from the Komenijského Institute. We conducted research in 12 universities. Altogether, we did 46 interviews with teacher educators and heads of teacher educations, also the teacher educators, most of them. So these are deans and faculty deans and head of departments. Okay, so please, next slide. So before we started the project, we worked on the conceptualization, how we understand global education, education for sustainable development within our project, because it is, we realized, and it's, of course, it's well known, that is increasingly complex concepts. They are shaped by the cultural, political, economic context, and we, within our project, realized that we don't really have the same understanding or same experiences or the same political background for all these concepts. We agreed that we will base on our interpretation on the Dublin Declaration, where the global education is used as an umbrella term and sustainability education is part of it. As regards the country-specific conceptualizations, in Poland and Slovakia, mainly global education is used as a main umbrella term. But in Hungary and Czech Republic, because of the strong tradition of environmental education, which later on developed into education for sustainability development, so it was supported by the social and economic leg of the notions. This notion is used much more. So ESD. When we also asked our participants how they think about global education and sustainability education, and it seems that among the participants, ESD is the term that mostly used or mostly understood, although some faculties, mainly in humanities, where they dedicate their work towards global education, the global education concept is used more. Yes, and next slide, I think that I give the floor to Christina now.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me just move the slide. So before we move on to the discussion of our main findings, just very briefly, a couple of sentences about the context in the Visegrad countries. As mentioned before, so those are the countries of Hungary, Poland, Czechia, and Slovakia. And when it comes to global education, so one thing that is important to mention is that global education has been introduced in these countries much later and with very different objectives than in the countries of Western Europe. The story of the origins of global education in Western Europe can be more or less traced back to the 70s, 80s, when more and more critical voices, mostly coming from NGOs and progressive educators, were calling for this education that would better map or better react and reflect the rapid changes on the global scene. And some more critical authors were also implying that global education, that was previously known as development education, was created as this attempt to remain in power when it comes to the creation of knowledge about the global south. But in the countries of V4, the story is a bit different. Global education has been more or less introduced in 2004 as a part of when the countries were entering the Euro-Atlantic structures, so mostly the European Union and NATO. And at that time, global education was conceived as being a part of the development cooperation agenda. And it was advised by the Western donors based on their experience to also include global education, but also based on the recommendations of international organizations. So more or less, it can be said that in these countries, global education was introduced more or less as a response to the pressures from the Western or from the Euro-Atlantic organizations and as well as countries. And also the sort of like desire of these V4 countries to enter these structures at the same time. But due to this, global education was introduced without much public discussions about what it is and what are the goals of global education and what it should serve. And perhaps this can also explain the lack of public ownership when it comes to the concept of global education or education for sustainable development in general. As I mentioned before, primarily, global education was part of the development cooperation apparatus. So in the past, it primarily belonged under the ministries of foreign affairs in all these countries, but it's slowly moving under the agenda of Ministry of Education. Nevertheless, there is still some confusion about this sort of institutional ownership. For example, in Slovakia, nowadays it belongs under the agenda of Ministry of Education, but at the same time it is being financed by Ministry of Foreign Affairs and so on. And at the same time, because it was part of the development cooperation, many times it is viewed as this outward-looking tool. This means that in many cases, global education is seen as education that is to be offered to the countries of the global south as a part of the broader efforts to provide education or increase the literacy levels of the students of the global south. And rather than focusing on global education inside a country. So there is also this confusion about where global education should be positioned, whether it's outward looking or inward looking. At the same time, when looking at global education and how it is being practiced in V4 countries right now, there are a couple of things that we observed. So one is that global education is not systematically incorporated into the education systems, and it is mostly driven by individuals that are motivated or they are passionate about the topics related to global education or education for sustainable development. And at the same time, global education is very much implemented on this ad hoc basis. And as it also, global education is mostly relying on the experience and expertise of NGOs, which are seen as one of the most important actors in the field of global education. And sometimes they are even formally recognized by the governments and as these primary actors, and they organize the trainings, they produce teaching activities and textbooks and so on for the educators that are interested in these topics. So one might ask why global education in these countries is not very systematically incorporated. There are a couple of reasons. One of them is that global education as such sort of exists on margins of political and public interests. For example, in most of these countries nowadays, there are no national strategies either for global education or education for sustainable development, even though in past, especially in Czechia and Slovakia, there were national strategies, but they are no longer being updated. Moreover, when it comes to these wider legal and organizational frameworks, even within those, dimensions of global education are minimal or non-existent. As in other countries, global education also faces the problem of insufficient funding. And the other problem that global education increasingly faces in these countries is the risk of politicization that Magdalena will also discuss later on, so I will leave it at that for now. But overall, so the other thing is that even though, and because our project was focusing on teacher education and how global education is being implemented in teacher education, we regard the fact is that higher education institutions and faculties that provide teacher education enjoy a relatively high level of autonomy in these countries. However, as will be discussed as well, it is a double-edged sword for global education, because if the leadership or management of these higher education institution is not open-minded towards these topics, then all the channels are suddenly blocked and nothing can happen. So that would be it about the context very briefly, and moving on to the motivational factors, because one of the most important things were the motivational factors for incorporating global education and education for sustainable development into teacher training. So from the data that we have gathered, it seemed to us that these motivational factors could be divided into two levels. So on one level, there are these personal motivational factors and goals that drive global education, but on the other hand, there are also certain institutional motivations that can help global education to be more incorporated into teacher education. But what is very much important to say is that most of the efforts for further institutionalization or incorporation of global education into teacher education is driven by these bottom-up approaches, so by these motivated individuals. And what we have noticed is that mostly individuals are driven by this personal commitment to teaching about these topics. Usually, these individuals, these university teachers, claim that they have this sort of natural inclination towards topics of global education or education for sustainable development. And these personal concerns then also spill over and intersect with these professional goals that they have when pursuing global education. And thanks to their interest, so I have just one example on from the top of my head. One of the interviews that I was doing, the respondent was saying that she was naturally interested in topics of sustainability. Then she decided to pursue a specialized high school that was specialized in these topics of environmental protection. And then she also pursued her studies within these topics in university studies, then in PhD studies, and then she stayed and decided to teach future teachers. So these are some of the paths of the respondents. But at the same time, what is also interesting is that the need or motivation to teach about global education is also coming from respondents' negative experiences with the educational systems as such, precisely because many have realized that as they are positioned right now, the education systems are unable to reflect the global interdependencies or the innovative approaches to education. So through their desire to actually provide more or higher quality education for the future teachers, they decided to pursue various innovative pedagogical approaches, one of them being global education. So that is also why they are, in a sense, motivated to teach, to sort of compensate for the way the education system as such functions. And then the other thing that is important to mention is the role of role models. So many of these teachers that are now preparing future teachers in the topics of global education state that role models, that even for them role models were, or in a form of, let's say, supervisors or their colleagues that were more experienced in the beginning, were the driving factors for further for the decision to actually pursue global education and to teach global education to future teachers. But at the same time, there is also this identification with the role of the teacher and the fact that the teacher has the ability to shape future generations and the sort of realization of responsibility that comes with it. So this is also one of the driving forces. And very briefly, I will also mention that precisely because these respondents are mostly driven by their personal motivations and personal goals, they are often facing burnout and exhaustion or isolation. And this is something that will be further explored by my colleagues. But since it's such an important finding that I felt like it was important to mention already here. But the other thing is, then we were also looking at these institutional motivations, whether there are certain goals or objectives at the level of institutions, whether that's at the level of faculty or whether that's the level of university, whether there are some goals that would somehow pursue global education or when we were looking at these strategic documents of these institutions, one thing that we have realized pretty quickly that there are no explicit mentions of global education or education for sustainable development. At the same time, implicitly, global education-related topics or values or attitudes can be found in many of these strategic documents. And they mostly reflect the university's need to contribute to sustainable development or to solve societal or regional problems or to actually foster socially and environmentally responsible attitudes among students. However, most of these goals are quite lofty, quite abstract, and in most of these strategic documents, there are no concrete steps that would outline how exactly, for example, the idea of sustainable development should be pursued at the level of institution. And at the same time, there are also certain initiatives within the universities that we have observed, such as the universities adopting the label of Green University or having these working groups that work on sustainable topics or having sustainability coordinators or green ambassadors, as some universities call them. But most of these initiatives are either dealing with sort of infrastructural things, such as, for example, creation of eco-canteen or responsible consumption or responsible building of the buildings or raising awareness through social media. But more or less, none of these, and there are actually two problems. So one problem with these institutional motivations is that it mostly focuses on these green topics or topics of sustainability and topics of, for example, justice or gender equality are not very much pursued, even though they make up a large part of what global education should be about. And the other problem is that even if there are these goals and motivations at the level of your institution, most of them are not actually directly connected with the preparation of future teachers, which is also problematic. And I will give floor back to Judit.
Thank you. I will briefly talk about just highlight some examples, basically quoting the participants of our research on the current practices, how they integrate sustainability and global education into their teaching practices. So as Christina mentioned, these topics are very much dependent on motivated individuals, and this is the way how these topics are integrated into individual courses. So it's driven by their interest and motivations, these teachers. As you can see in this quote from Hungary, this is a teacher educator with a psychology background, and he mentioned that he tries to integrate the environmental aspects of the psychological subject when he's teaching attitudes. As we mentioned, in Hungary, these topics are the most prominent, so environmental sustainability. Or from another interviewee from Poland, She also tries to deepen the content of the courses. So not only mention, but try to dedicate the whole, so focus the whole course content around the idea of sustainability. But as we can see, these are fragmented initiatives because there is no consensus or not a pre-planned curriculum development behind these practices. Nonetheless, they are very good, and these teacher educators are really very enthusiastic about them. Okay, please go to the next slide. This need of collaboration is recognized among our participants as well. So especially the management, those interviewees from the management, they try to organize some collaborations. And as we know that these educational issues require a transdisciplinary, multidisciplinarity approach, they try to find collaboration across faculty departments. And there are some successes, as you can see in this example from Slovakia. UMB is the name of one of the participating universities. So these are the codes. Just I want to correct the code. And H2 means that it's the second interviewee who is in the head, who is in the management position. So head 2. Okay, so they are trying to involve several teachers with different backgrounds in this gender identity in society subject, which is a university-wide subject. Okay, next slide, please. Also at the organizational levels, so it's not only the individual teachers level, there are some initiatives to bring into faculty cooperations together. They create sometimes separate course is created. The first interfaculty course last semester. Well, it's not so early, so to say. This example is from one of the Czech universities. Say they try to focus around the sustainability development goals of the UNESCO and center their curricular development around that. In Hungary, one of the participating universities created a network of sustainability universities, and they developed a course for master and bachelor students. Again, it's not only for teacher educators, but all students of the universities. But these courses are available for all students. Of course, these are online courses, and it results in testing. So it's much more conveying knowledge and not so much competency development. But at least it is an initiative of a collaborative nature. Okay, the next one, please. It's very important when doing global education that the local environment is included, because we need to answer or address the needs as universities of the local environments and try to find solutions together. And there are very good examples in two different Slovakian universities. The first one is introduce service learning as a method and as a course, already running over more than a decade now at the university. and they are addressing the real needs of the local communities. So they are, with the involvement of students and teachers, they try to answer challenges that basically, I think these are social sustainability challenges in the local communities. The Curious Learning at the other university is another course, which is based on innovative STEM education, and it is also building on the cooperation of NGOs and business sector as well. In the Czechia, there is also cooperation with an environmental NGO. Students go internship on there. And Hungary also building on the network of the so-called eco schools. This has a strong tradition, and these schools have very well-developed methodologies and materials. And when student teachers spend their practicum there, they can learn a lot from the schools. So this kind of school-university partnership is where the university is learning from the school. Yes, please, next one. What we found that the literature really reinforces that for global education, sustainability education, constructive pedagogies are needed, and it requires a lot of reforms on the part of the university. And as this quote from one of the teachers shows, these teacher educators who are motivated towards global education implicitly feel what is needed. So everything in this quote, you can see you need new methods, you need engaged students, and you need to engage students, you need interdisciplinarity, you need to change the learning environment, you need to give hands-on experiences, and last but not least, you need to provide hope for the students. So also dealing with the emotional part of these topics is very important. So all these teachers are aware of these issues, but unfortunately not much support is given to them. And we found that, and this is also reinforced by the literature, that there need to be more faculty development programs, so that give them the tools how to do these innovative teaching, and support them and empower teacher educators to do these innovative practices. And I think that's all from my part, and I give the floor to Magdalena.
So I will try to be very brief, and I'm going to tell you about obstacles and facilitating factors of integrating global education into teacher education. And we have classified these hindering and facilitating factors according to the levels at which they operate. So I will start with the obstacles and with the individual level. Individual level relates to the attitudes, skills, and competences, etc., of the individuals. So two issues were the most visible in the interviews, and they apply to every country examined, so all Visegrad countries. First was burnout of the academic teachers. These teachers that try to teach global education. This is related to another challenge on another level, on institutional level. So I will come back to this a bit later. And the second factor, the second obstacle, was lack of interest and lack of motivation among students and academics as well. So the interviewees felt lonely, they felt that there was a big risk of burnout, and among them there was no interest, no motivation among their academic fellows. Other significant obstacles were lack of personal capacities, lack of knowledge, lack of skills among academics in general. Global education is still something new. Academia is not familiar with it. So many people think that if they want to start their journey with global education, they would need to learn a lot and to develop their skills. And they have no time, so they even don't try. Other obstacle was close-minded colleagues or prejudiced colleagues. Some interviewees told us about their fellows from the institute or from the faculty that they call them climate changes deniers. So this is also a rather obvious obstacle to start teaching global education. And again, some conservative attitudes, attachment to old teaching habits, difficulties or lack of will to introduce new methods or some innovations. The next level was an institutional level, and it relates to the university as an institution, its structure, strategies, policies, and so on. And first and foremost was an overburden of academic teachers. And this factor operates both on institutional level and on national level. And I will talk about this a bit later. Another institutional, another factor on the institutional level was interviewees mentioned deficits of communication, little collaboration, especially within their institution, within their units. Their initiatives were isolated, or the only ones in the faculty, for example. Christina, please, next slide. Thank you. And the local level, it was quite rarely mentioned. Local level relates to the social, cultural, and geographical context in which the university operates. It includes, for example, the relationships between the university and the local community, local institutions, local NGOs. And in the interviews, it appeared only once as an obstacle. It was in Poland. It was a Polish interviewee, and it was about the attitudes and prejudices in some students' families, in some local communities, and their attitudes conflict with the values of global education. And this was, of course, a factor hindering teaching global education to future teachers. Next level is a national level, and it relates to the state's regulation, state's policies, national strategies or lack of them, funding, and so on. So the most important and very widely talked about was an overburden of academic teachers. They have, in the opinion of interviewees, academic teachers have a lot of administrative and bureaucratic tasks required. They have to teach, they have to do research, they have to do some administration tasks, and they feel One interviewee told us that they feel like robots, multifunctional robots. It's even harder to teach global education or to incorporate global education into teacher education when there is no or very little support from the authorities, from I mean the state, the country authorities like ministries, decision makers. But this factor was mentioned only by the Polish and Slovak academics. It wasn't mentioned in Hungary and in Czechia. Other challenges, other obstacles described by the interviewees are mainly related to both levels, national and supranational, and for depending on the interpretation, actually. So for the clarity, I put them here as belonging to the supranational level, because they are common for all the countries. They are almost independent of us, and they operate on a global level. So the first one was expressed by one of the interviewees. It is about the way the higher education system in Slovakia works. So we may say that not only in Slovakia, because it's related to the dominance of neoliberal trends in science and in higher education. It is exemplified by terms like academic productivity, cost effectiveness, competition, university rankings, and so on and so forth. And interviewees pointed out that research is more important than teaching, more valued. So there is little emphasis on teaching, even on teaching future teachers. Financing is based on publications. Papers in English are more valued than in local national languages. And this results in limitation of the access for teachers, for Slovak teachers, for Polish teachers, because they, even if they know English, excuse me, they don't want to read in English. Another common threat was politicization of global education and education for sustainable development, because they both deal with controversial topics. These topics are perceived as political or ideological, thus undesirable at the university, because in general there is an opinion that the university shouldn't be politicized in general. The third challenge or obstacle is about low interest in global education in the society in general. And it results also in its marginal position in academia. If there is little societal interest, students are not interested, authorities are not interested, decision makers don't really mainstream these perspectives in social life and education. So there is little motivation for teaching or researching these topics. And this little interest may be amplified when there are, for example, climate change deniers, and if there are people actively opposing the inclusion of global education into academic education. And the interviewees mentioned such colleagues in their institution. One country-specific threat was only Hungarians indicated a lack of funding, low salaries, low prestige of teacher position, and small number of students that want to be teachers in the future. Although I suppose this is the case also in other countries, but the interviewees didn't bring these issues to the fore. But in Poland also, the prestige of teacher position is low and salaries are low and so on and so forth. Christina, please, next slide. Thank you. But of course, there are also some facilitating or enabling factors. We also sort them according to the level. So at the individual level, the most important opportunity or strength is related to knowledge, skills, and commitment of engaged individuals. They are really dedicated. They do a lot, and global education at the university is based on their activities. On the institutional level, the biggest opportunity is related to the collaboration, intra-institutional collaboration or inter or extra-institutional collaboration. Regarding the first one, intra-institutional, on this level, strong teams of peers, supportive managers, university-wide cooperation may create a solid foundation. Sometimes it was seen in the formation of working groups, teams, or centers focused on global education or education for sustainable development, such as the center at Matej Bell University in Slovakia. Inter and extra-institutional collaboration relates to the collaboration between universities, between university and NGO, collaboration with other external partners, international cooperation, and even if some universities have started to create some sustainable development infrastructure, as Christina and Judit mentioned, some institutional solutions, some as sustainable development coordinators, there was no mention about such attempts in relation to global education. So only this environmental aspect has started to it was started with this environmental aspect, but nothing about social justice, global social justice, and such topics. Sorry, I forgot the word. So nothing related to global education. On both institutional, next please, Christina, next. Okay, so on institutional and national level, the hindering factors were academic autonomy and possibility of starting something innovative by individual teachers, individual academics, because of this autonomy. So if there is an individual who wants to introduce global education into his or her teaching, they can do this, but of course this is only an isolated island. Nationally, some interviewees mentioned curricular reforms in formal education that offer a valuable chance to embed global education into pre-service teacher education. For example, in Poland, if global education or some aspects would be included into the new curriculum that is going to be established, I don't know, next year, there would be a need for teaching future teachers about global education. So in Poland and in Slovakia, it was also mentioned. And that's enough from me. Now, Christina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I will just briefly conclude because most of this and in a sense how I will conclude. So in all of these 4 countries of the Visegrad 4, there were similar patterns that could be observed when it comes to global education and teacher training. The first thing is that when it comes to global education or education for sustainable development, many times, even though the respondents are familiar with the terms, they do not refer to them explicitly in their work while they are teaching, but they are rather implicitly working with certain themes, attitudes, values, and so on. And at the same time, there is also the predominance of the sustainability topics, as mentioned before. When it comes to the way how global education works and functions within the system of teacher education, what we have observed that definitely there is an increased awareness about global education in general. And there is also an increased interest, both from the side of the teachers as well as the students, therefore the future teachers. But at the same time, the implementation still remains marginal and ad hoc. And that is precisely because they are not institutionalized, these efforts. And these efforts, in fact, are driven by these motivated individuals, therefore they are very much isolated. And because most of these individuals have mentioned that there is a real risk of burnout that they have either experienced or they are fearing that they will experience in the near future, the global education or education for sustainable development is constantly being endangered. And while the support of the management or the leadership of the faculty or the university as such is crucial, that was mentioned by more or less most of these respondents. The thing is that even with these open-minded managements and leaderships, most of these efforts do not target teacher education directly, but these efforts are much broader, and they are not very well developed. So in this sense, most of the work falls back on the shoulders once again of the individuals that are supported by the NGOs. But the problem with the NGOs is, first of all, that even though they provide trainings and publications and textbooks for the teachers, they cannot award credits. So in a sense, they are still viewed as external actors or outsiders. So they are not very much recognized. And at the same time, as mentioned before, NGOs especially in Slovakia and Hungary, are working in this hostile environment. They are sometimes labeled as these foreign agents. Their funding is being diminished or cut. And at the same time, their credibility is constantly questioned, which once again doesn't really help global education. And finally, even if there is this relative openness of these universities to teach global education, it is once again threatened by this insufficient political support, either because there is a lack of legal frameworks that would actually support the incorporation of global education, not only within teacher education, but also within other levels of education, because if there is no legal framework that would actually say that global education should be part of elementary or secondary education, then why teacher education should teach these topics? That's also the question. But at the same time, the sort of other problem is that, and maybe that's one of the questions, is that, and it's perhaps an ironic question because the question is whether global education or education for sustainable development are actually, sustainable in teacher education, precisely because they work within a system that relies on the bottom-up approach and the bottom-up efforts of individuals. And there are minimal top-down initiatives, and sometimes even these top-down efforts actually work against global education. So it's a question how global education then could be further institutionalized or supported in teacher education. One way is to adopt a whole university approach, where universities would adopt this comprehensive approach, integrating education for sustainable development or global education into their core strategies, and then they would provide support to enhance their relevance and impact for the students. Similar attempts to do so were made in one of the universities in Czech Republic, where they created a position for sustainability coordinator at the level of university, who also coordinates their efforts with the sustainability coordinators at the level of the municipality and at the level of the region. So in a sense, they are trying to find ways how to pursue sustainable development in this multi-level approach, which could be, in a sense, also applied to global education. So that's one of the ways how to do it, perhaps. And the final concluding remark, and also coming back to the title of our project. Our project was titled Teachers for a Sustainable Future. So in a sense, there was a big focus on the teachers that are preparing the future teachers. Especially because we view teachers as these agents of change, because they can equip the future teachers with the knowledge, with the attitudes, with the values that are required in order to teach global education or education for sustainable development properly. But it's a question precisely because, on the one hand, while we recognize that global education, while we recognize that university teachers are agents of change, in this concrete case, in these 4 countries, the problem or the dilemma is that the teachers need to constantly reclaim their agency when it comes to incorporating global education, when it comes to justification as to why global education should be a part of teacher education. So, and we view that this could be one of the contributions, because we feel like, in a sense, there are many studies of global education from various fields. But the studies that would sort of holistically look at the system that can hinder or favor global education, there are not that many studies that would deal with this topic. So in a sense, our study demonstrates that there should be more attention paid to these institutional, national, as well as regional levels and contexts that may hinder or favor institutionalization of global education. Because without understanding how these systems work, the teachers that have the ambition to introduce global education as an innovative approach to education are then very much struggling within such contexts. So, in a sense, we will leave you here with this thought. Maybe it can be a food for thought for the discussion. And we would like to, first of all, thank you very much for your attention. And we would be really glad if you'll have any questions or comments.
Thank you so much for the overview, like you said, of systems and contexts where global education by some motivated teachers is implemented. We are running out of time, and we have to close. So thank you for the very active participation, good questions, but especially for our presenters today. And hope to see you again in the next webinar. Please follow the website. Bye-bye.